The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ginny Van Dusen, Director of Alumni Career Development at Holy Cross, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, What Does It Mean When? Stories in Compensation Negotiation. This is the next installment in our series of web-based presentations covering a broad range of career development topics. Today, I'm very happy to welcome back Katie Donovan, class of '85. Katie, founder of Equal Pay Negotiations, is a pay equity consultant who works with individuals to negotiate their pay and benefits, and with policymakers on the unintended biases in the hiring, promotion, and review processes. We'll be together for a little under an hour. Katie will speak and will then take questions from you for as long as time allows. I encourage you to submit questions throughout this presentation by checking out the question function located on your webinar toolbar to the right. Thanks again for joining us. And now it'll be my pleasure to hand things over to Katie.
Thanks, Ginny, and thanks everyone for joining us today. As Ginny said, it'll be about an hour that we're together. The agenda for today is to talk about 8 common situations in salary negotiations or just getting jobs and being handed compensation to figure out what does that really mean. And then we'll talk about how to actually determine what a job should pay and Q&A. I'm going to try to leave about 20 minutes for questions at the end, still long enough to go deep enough onto the 8 common situations. Hopefully I walked this fine line correctly. All right, now let's see if I can master moving the slides. So the first offer that someone gets, this is actually pretty common, which surprises me always. They're so happy with the offer. You know, it's more than I wanted. I'm happy enough with it. I never expected that much. Or they're just so happy not to be looking for a job anymore that they're ready to jump at it and grab it. You know, that offer is amazing. Here's the thing about the first offer. That terminology, first offer, exists for a reason. 84% of hiring managers expect some kind of negotiations. That means 84% of the time, that offer is not enough money. There is money left to the side to negotiate with. So even if you think it's the absolute best you could do, triple what you ever expected, it just means your expectations are amazingly low. And that's very common for people in different groups who experience statistically wage gaps. So whether you're a woman or a person of color or a person from the LGBTQI community or a person with disabilities, research shows statistically you are underpaid. So we're kind of anchored lower and expect lower than what the job actually could pay. So when this situation comes, where whatever the job offer is, get yourself out of there so you can have a little happy dance and not worry about what you're going to say. Thank them profusely for the job offer. And then say, I'd like to spend a day or two looking at it and get back to you. Can I get back to you Monday or Tuesday? Confirm when you're getting back to them. Then when you get back to them, whether it's a phone call or an email or even a text, I know people, I've had clients who have successfully negotiated via text. I myself would not do it that way, but it works. Get back to them and thank them again profusely. This is a great opportunity. I'm really happy about it. Here's what's holding me back from saying yes. And no matter what, you always say that offer is lower than I expected based on the current market. Those words have to come out of your mouth or in writing every offer you ever get, or a variation of that theme. The other is, you want to throw out some other things. I'm surprised there wasn't a signing bonus. They're pretty common. I'm surprised the vacation time's really shorter than I'm already getting. You throw things out. You got to throw the entire package on the table at once. So there's a puzzle that can be maneuvered to make the final offer something that you and the employer can agree on. So that's what you do when, even though you think the offer is amazing, you are amazingly disappointed. Always. The offer is not negotiable, another classic. Now, if you are asking, is this negotiable? 9 times out of 10, you are going to be told, no, it is not. If you were looking for the job offer or the job advertisement to say somewhere that it is negotiable, once in a blue moon you do see that, it's a rarity. Just assume the offer is negotiable and start negotiating. Never ask, because you're more often than not going to be told no. And it is, because they fell in love with you. They're offering, you are number one. They don't want to just close the deal. And it's easier to offer you $5,000, $10,000 more dollars than start again with the next person in line. And there usually is more money. Now here's an interesting one. You're already employed at the company and you want higher pay. You discovered that you are paid lower than you should be. But when you go and have the conversation with your boss, you're told, I don't know what you're thinking about. You're already the highest paid in the department. You're already the highest paid doing what you do. That doesn't matter. That's a red herring. It may be absolutely true, but it has nothing to do with why you're in the room. You're there because you did research and you found out the market's paying $75,000 for this job on average, and you're only making $60,000. Something's wrong. And so anytime they talk about where you are in comparison to others and that you're already way up there, say, well, that's great to know. I assumed I am because I'm doing better than everyone. Have some comparison points. Well, yeah, I bring in more deals. Like I move more paper. I make more decisions. I save more money. I create more money. Whatever it might be, have that point of reference to compare to the others and say, of course I'm making the most. But even making the most is too low for the current market. And that's the issue on that. And that's where you then, and we'll show how you do research on the current market and what to have available. By the way, whatever you're going to tell your boss, they already know that. You're not sharing any information with your bosses or HR or whoever does negotiating at your company, anything they don't already know if they're good at their job. They were just hoping to continue to get you at a bargain basement. Or their philosophy, and we'll talk more about companies' philosophy in pay, is to always underpay. If that's the case, you're never, ever, ever going to be paid appropriately. They get the inexperienced people, let them work for 2 years, get your experience, and then go elsewhere. So your job is to go elsewhere. That's a different conversation. You go through the negotiation and then start your job search. So some of these you can win, some of them you can't. And speaking of winning, actually I want to touch on this before we go too far. Your negotiation success should not be that you got everything you wanted. If that's how you're defining it, you're leaving money on the table. A truly, really good negotiation is when both parties feel like they lost somewhere in that negotiation. So think of it like playing tic-tac-toe when you were a little kid. You either won a lot or you lost a lot, and then you started playing with someone else who was good at it. And no one ever won. That's when you know you're good at negotiating. No one actually wins everything. Most of us think that's still a loss. That's where you're really getting it right. Here's my all-time favorite thing. Situation that happens all the time. Anecdotally, when I talk to HR people, it happens all the time to women. Men, you're not experiencing this at the same rate as we gals. You get a better title, but no money with it. Oh, we can't give you that raise, but we'll give you senior XYZ or move you to the management level. This hurts you in a couple of ways. One, you're still not getting paid appropriately for your job. And two, when you go for another job, and technically right now you still can be asked, what are you making? In Massachusetts, come July of next year, that will be illegal to ask. It's rolling out now in other cities and states, so you'll see more and more. It's a question that will soon go by the wayside. But right now, when you're asked that question, they're looking at you at it to see, like, is she or he getting paid appropriately? Because if you're not where they expect, they think you're bad. So now if you're underpaid as a manager and you become a senior manager and you're underpaid even that much more, it's going to be very hard for you to get director jobs because they're looking at, hey, she's a senior manager and she's getting paid 30% less than we expected. There must be something amazingly wrong with her. So never, ever accept a better title without a raise. Ask the question instead, I'm having trouble understanding how that helps me. Can you walk me through that? Because I came to talk to you about being underpaid, and I'm still underpaid. Giving me a new title doesn't help address that situation. Let's walk through that. Now notice none of my suggestions say throw out a dollar value. All of my suggestions are more about talking the situation through, getting their perspective, what's going on. And if they say, well, this is going to help you because it'll help your career, you can talk to them about, well, here's how it doesn't. And then talk to them about what happens if I don't accept the higher title. Do you have to go hire someone to do that job? Because now they have two people they have to pay. And therefore, if you have to go hire someone to do that job, doesn't it make sense to give me a raise and you're making out on the deal? And then the final part on this situation is talking once again and always talk about the market as a whole. Here's what the job pays. You're talking about me being a senior manager. Here's what senior managers pay. Here's the extra work I'll be doing. And just listening to why they say that isn't true. For any of you who do work in a position where you're hiring people, and if you are thinking of using this, it's a very common thing to do. Go back in your records and see, is this something you're doing for one group of people more than others? Because if it is a bias, it's a bias you definitely want to stop that in your company because it can open up all kinds of potential pitfalls, openings for lawsuits and things if it's a trend for certain areas, certain people. So be very leery of it as an employer and be very concerned of it as an employee. It's not a good thing on either side of the plate. Another situation, a lot of people get concerned that their formal review keeps getting pushed back. The bigger the company, the more formal reviews there tend to be, the more restricted they are about them. It doesn't matter. You know, if your goal is to make more money, the formal review is actually the worst time to get more money. Oh, you may get a 1.5% to 3% raise. You may be able to negotiate it up and get a 4% raise. There's very little wiggle room at formal review time. That stuff is decided months and months and months ahead of time. So if your fiscal year is starting in January and they're going to start doing formal reviews November, December, you should be talking to your boss now, if not back in August. about what you're looking to make. So they're plugging in the numbers now, because now is when they're creating the budget for January, if they haven't already finished it. The best time to get a big increase is totally off cycle. Whenever the day is that you realize you are underpaid. That's when you go in and you say, hey, I just realized, I saw an article in a newspaper, or I tripped over a report, or however you discovered it. I just realized that I am amazingly underpaid for the current market. What can we do to address that? I know it sounds like a very simple way to broach the topic. And notice, once again, I'm not saying a number. I'm asking the company to go and come up with a new number. And I'm going to be prepared for all the potential no's they're going to have. Well, first they're going to tell you your research is wrong. So you're going to have your research available. And we'll talk about how to do the research. Then they're going to tell you, well, we don't make changes until January, the new fiscal year. That's great, but if you agree with me today that I'm underpaid, I would expect that to be retroactive. So there's a lot of ways to address it. But don't get wrapped around any formal review, because that's very little additional money available then. And also, whether it's the formal review time or another time, the terminology of salary adjustment is very useful. It opens another bank of money, different than raises. It means the company's done a really bad job at estimating what your position should be paid. It doesn't mean that you're good, so good they need to give you more money. And that is a great way to move that forward. All right, the next situation. This is interesting and can happen more often than you think. My direct report earns more than I do. So think of the bands, and this happens more in bigger companies because they have the bands. Usually the bands of salary overlap each other. It's very rare to see, one goes to 150,000 and then the next one starts at 151. One may go to 150,000, the next one starts at 130. So you want to, and more often than not, the bigger the company, the managers aren't involved directly in deciding the pay. A lot of that can be done through HR and you never see it, or you recently became a manager and you inherited people and didn't know what they all were making and starting to do a little research and you discover, hey, I have 2 direct reports making more than I am, or one that's completely wrong. When I have clients who have that situation, more often than not, I get clients who are amazingly mad, amazingly hurt, feel like they've been disrespected, millions of feelings. Here's the thing, put the feelings aside. You have just been handed a gift, an amazing gift. Because it's really hard for an employer to say you are wrong, you shouldn't be paid more than the people who report to you. All you do is bring your data, walk to your manager and say like, hey, this is what's happening. I assume you will have this fixed within the week because this is wrong. And let them come back to you and tell you how they're fixing it. It's illegal to downgrade anyone's pay to make things appropriate. So they will be upgrading your pay. So it really, it's an assumptive thing you have to do where you just walk in and go like, wow, I was shocked to find this. I'm assuming you didn't realize it. I need to get paid more than my direct report since I'm doing more than they are. So I leave you with all these records. Please get back to me with what your plans are on doing that. They may start talking specific numbers with you then, but most of these conversations are going to be conversations that you start and then you leave and give them time to do their work They're going to have to go talk to HR. They're going to have to go look at their budget. They're going to have to go do a few things. And you may have been sitting on this for like a month, getting real worked up, or doing all the research, or just waiting for the right time because you knew they're in the middle of a big whatever going on at work and you wanted your boss to be more relaxed. All completely legitimate. But all of things that you have this totally in your mind and you know where it should end. And this is the first time your boss is hearing it. So give your manager the time to dissect it, digest it, and come to terms with what they're going to do to fix it. But this is actually a really good situation. If it happens, it's an automatic raise. If it's not, they really hate you and you should go look for a new job. I know that's kind of way too direct, but that's pretty much the situation. Or they're really broke and can't even things out. And that, again, you should start looking for a new job. But this should not exist. The converse of it is my boss doesn't make that much. Now, I mentioned earlier different groups of people who tend statistically to make less. So if you have a boss, a manager, who fits into one of those categories, a person of color or woman, etc., there's a good chance statistically they are underpaid for their job. So they're not making the high end of their position, which means your pay may be deflated. Just anchoring it based on that. So you may do your research and discover your job should be paying you 20% more than what you're currently making. But your boss is only making 15% more than what you're making. Don't get wrapped around that. That's not your battle. Your battle is to focus on the current market. And, you know, for people who got jobs at the end of the recent recession and you've been getting like a 2% raise every year since, you haven't caught up to what new kids are getting as they walk in, and we'll talk about that more. So that's one situation where that kind of thing can happen. Your boss started during a bad economy. You started during a better economy, but they're not keeping up. That's another way that can happen. So there really are multiple ways this situation can happen, but you want to say, hey, here's the current market. I'm not getting that. And when your boss says, and this does happen, the bosses do say, managers do share, well, you're asking for more than I make. Your manager should work with you. If you can come up with an argument that gets you more, going back to the last slide, then your manager now has a reason to get more as well. He or she should not be hindering you. Doesn't make sense on this unless the company truly is too broke to pay what the market says the job is worth. So you want to work with them and you're like, hey, that's a bummer, that's terrible, but if we work and make it so that I'm getting the appropriate pay, wouldn't it then mean they have to give you a raise as well? Your manager may not be thinking that through, so throw that into the conversation if this comes back. And regardless, say, that's intriguing, but my concern here is that I'm paid appropriately for my job. Because the perfect job, because this is a job and not a hobby or a volunteer situation, is one where you're getting paid appropriately. You can love whatever you do, and I really could care less what you do. But if you're not getting paid appropriately for what you're doing, then you should go do it elsewhere. And that discontent is really the leverage that gets you the next pay raise. Companies pay people when they think they're going to lose them. Never say you're happy and will stay there forever and a day, but you want more. you just lost the argument. They'll never pay the people that will stay forever. They don't have to. All right, I alluded to this, or actually I started talking about this already. The new guy. So markets change. I always use lawyers as a good example. There's this cycle that goes on in law schools. They have increase in enrollment and then decreases. It increases when a group of kids graduate law school and make huge money, and their friends find out, and their younger brothers and sisters find out, and their younger cousins. And word gets out, like, if I go to law school, I can get a job starting at, and that's just amazing. I'm going to go do that. And then there's way too many kids going to law school. And then they go graduate, and there's way too many kids graduating law school. So the law firms are not paying them the big bucks anymore, and it goes down. And then there won't be many people going to law school anymore because why pay that kind of extra money to make the same as someone graduating from a bachelor's degree? And so the law firms are going to stop paying higher prices, higher salaries to the new law graduates in 5 years. You know, so the cycle continues. It's a funny cycle. I see it over and over and over again. And it's just a market thing. So if you were unlucky enough to graduate law school at a time where there were way too many lawyers graduating, or unlucky enough to graduate any school or be looking for a new job during the recession, you are most likely underpaid if you're still at the same place. You know, they have given you a 2% raise, a 3% raise. They may have given you a promotion with like a 6% raise. But the pay was so compressed at that point. The market is different now. I'm not saying people are making millions more and it's just hand over fist, but it's better. And it's better than what a 2% raise every year would get you to. So where we have this theory that, oh, I put in more years, so I must be making better than the new person, it's actually more often than not the reverse. And new people are making better than the people who stay in a job too long. You need to move to make money and to stay compensated appropriately. Nowadays, the average in a company or in a position, you can get promoted in a company, but in a position is 4 years. The younger you are in your career, the shorter the stay. As you get into like your 40s, 50s, you're working 8 to 10 years at companies where, you know, if you're 22, 23, you can be changing every year for a while. And that's okay. That's what it is nowadays. Because one, they've flattened mid-management. It practically doesn't exist. So to get experience to help your career move, a lot of times you have to actually change companies or even change industries so that you can see the bigger picture of business. And they understand that. And it's at those moments of changing companies or changing positions, that is your moment in time to get the 15% raise, the 20% raise, the 30% raise. And there's no magical number what that percentage would be. It really know what the market is. So if the new guy is making more than you discover it, it's a good opportunity for you to walk into your manager and say like, hey, I overheard Bob talking about starting and Bob's making 60 grand or 100 grand and I'm only making 40 grand or 80 grand. I assume we can fix that, then I'm paid appropriately since the company believes this job should pay 60 grand. I assume we can make it that I make that as well. Since I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, I'm good at it. I've gotten no dings on my reviews. Is there any reason I should not be making that? And leave it to them. And if they come back with a reason, you have to be ready to overcome it. You also need to be ready to, at some point in time, look for another job if they're never going to pay you appropriately. The only leverage in negotiation, true leverage, is to say no. So at some point in time, you need to be willing to say no. And to be willing to say no is when you have another job. That's the true time you're willing to say no. Okay, let's see, next. So now we've done the 8 different common situations. There was a lot more. I could go on for days. You probably all like, darn, she didn't say this situation, which is yours. Feel free to put that in as a question. But let's talk about what I kept going back to. Determining what the compensation should be. And it's not about knowing your worth. I actually hate that expression to the bone, to the core of my existence. You are like the last rounding error in determining what a job should pay. A job is long decided, its compensation, before you even apply. They figure out what they can pay for a job before they advertise it. It starts with what's the market. And that's about 50% of what the job should pay. Then it's the employer's philosophy and ability. There are 2 philosophies that are kind of on the end points. There's the get them young, inexperienced, pay them dirt, we'll give them experience, and then they can move on. And the flip side of that is give them golden handcuffs. We are going to get the most experienced, the best in the business, pay them a premium so they'll never leave. And I've had a few clients like that. They're getting sick of where they're working, they're ready for a change, and they go looking, and no matter where they go, they're going to have to take a 15% cut because their premium is so high. And then they have to figure out, well, kids get the braces, kids get college coming up, kids get this, that's not going to work. So it really is golden handcuffs. You may or may not leave them at some point in time. Usually it takes you about 2 or 3 years to mentally get ready to leave in the golden handcuff situation. But the vast majority of employers are somewhere in the middle. They're trying to pay kind of mid, around the median, somewhere like 40 to 75% range of what the job pays. They want to be competitive. They want good employees with some experience, but you don't have to be the biggest, the brightest, the best in the world doing the job. And they're going to pay you decent money. But they expect some wiggle room. Now, companies may want to give the golden handcuffs, but they don't have that ability to pay. So then stuck giving you a fairly decent competitive salary package. That's fine. But you'll hear almost from every employer in the negotiation process that they can't afford to pay you what you're looking for. And that is just an out and out lie more often than not. They can't give you $3,000 more, then you should be looking for another job. And you can even ask them that in the process. That comes up because it's such a go-to. We can't afford that. You're so good, but we really can't afford that. It's a tough time. Do your research in knowing the finances of the company so you can call them on it and say like, well, that's really interesting, but we just closed the deal with this new client, saw that we've had double-digit increase in gross revenue over the past 3 years. You know, whatever data point calls them on it, you need to be ready for it because that is going to come up, your ability to pay. Your credentials is the last thing. So if you have something that's special to compare, and it doesn't even have to be that special, you just need to be able to compare yourself to either people doing the same job in your company or in the industry, or just one thing that you've done that's impressive. And impressive means money. Every single one of us impacts the money of a company. And by company, I'm meaning employer. It can be a nonprofit. It can be a government agency. It can be a small mom and pop. It can be an international multi-Fortune 500 company. Doesn't matter. If you can prove you've saved them money or created them money, then you showed them where they can get the money to pay you more. Hey, I just saved you $1 million. Why can't I get $20,000 more? And I actually had a woman at an event share an amazing story where she found an error in how they were doing something, that they just tweaked the order of it, they could save $1 million. Literally $1 million. They had every branch come to her to learn this. And they never gave her a new title. They never gave her a raise. They gave her and a husband dinner on a harbor cruise. And she was happy with it. She so lost the moment in time to get a huge raise, huge promotion. But it's those moments. And it does, even if it was $10,000 that she figured out to save. And they bring in people from all these other branches to learn it. That's a moment in time. Don't lose those moments. Use them. Okay, so you're really know the compensation. How do you know it? Well, job market research is pretty easy nowadays. Go online, salary.com, pay scale. Indeed, I like a lot because it actually uses the salaries posted on job advertisements. Less than 10% of job ads actually include anything about what a job will pay, which is just wrong in a million reasons, because for 99% of us, this is the financial decision that impacts every other financial decision in our life. But we're blind. That's okay. Every job board has some kind of level of information on what a job should pay, so check those out. Other things that aren't used as much, trade associations. I used to work for one. Every year we did research on what was going on for jobs. Employers like it because they're trying to figure out what to pay people. Employees like it because they can figure out if they're underpaid. You can look for job function or industry. Whatever you do, there is at least one, but more likely than not, like 5 trade associations for whatever you do. And then headhunters, they're an amazing resource. They're hated for no reason, if you ask me. Sure, you get an email, a LinkedIn request, hey, I got a job. Be nice to them. These are people literally knocking on your door asking if they can probably offer you a job. At some point in time, you are going to want a job, so be nice to them. But reach out to them and say, hey, I'm an accountant making $50,000 in Boston. Can I do better? And they will tell you, wow, I have 7 openings right now for accountants, the type of accounting you do, in Boston for 70 plus. Send me your resume. We'll see if you fit that kind of bill and see if we can put you up for any of those jobs. You accomplish 2 things. You, 1, find out what the jobs are actually paying out there. And 2, you start the all-important other options in your life so you can actually negotiate comfortably in the sense that this isn't the only thing. And by the way, when I say negotiate and having other job offers or opportunities or looking out there, don't say quit. Don't call someone saying, well, I'm quitting or I'm leaving if you can't meet this number, until you actually have an offer from somewhere else. Never do that, because then you just doubled the time to find another job if you're unemployed. You don't want to do that. Okay, in your research, look at benefits. It's more than just your salary. And in the negotiation, please do not do drip, drip, water torture of, let's talk about my salary, then let's talk about my vacation, then let's talk about my 401k or my bonus or whatever else you care about. It's all at once. If you do the drip drip, that is the only time I am aware of people getting job offers rescinded, so do not do that. It's to your peril. So in the research, I'm telling you, go do this research. Now I'm going to tell you the awful truth about your research. When you go online and do your research, it's wrong. Because here's what happens. I've talked about the few different groups of people who statistically are underpaid. They have wage gaps. So if I go and in Boston, I look for a financial analyst and I see, oh, $112,000, that's what I should be aiming for. Well, just knowing that women make on average 20% less than men in the financial world, it's closer to 40% less than men. They're in this data. And I don't want to make the average of men and women. I want to make what the men are making on average. And by the way, I went to Holy Cross and I'm better than average, so I really should be making like the 75 percentile. Figure out where you are in the actual kind of bell curve, or however your resource delivers the data. But then you have to up it. So if I'm thinking I'm average and 112 is what I should be making, knowing the percentage of men and women in a specific job or industry, and then knowing the pay gap for them. And I know that's more work than you need to do, but I'm a nerd and I do that. It's actually 130,000 that men are making on average, just based on knowing those 3 data points. So you have to up it. Excuse me. So whatever you think is the number, it's higher. Make sure you do that. So in summary, and I'm ending just about where I said I would be, about 40 minutes in, so we'll have time for questions and answers. No matter what, negotiate. It's always a good idea. Be professional, be polite, but don't just roll over and accept. Focus on the market value and not yourself. Market value has much more to do with the overall data, and it's more objective. You're completely subjective. Subjective stuff tends to be a better argument. Include other benefits within the conversation of your negotiation, but don't accept something as, oh, well, they gave me this, like more job flexibility. It doesn't always replace money. Make sure you're kind of thinking about that bigger picture. And I love the retroactive pay raise. Don't forget that. So with that, I'm going to open this up, or Ginny's going to open this up for Q&A. And while we're going through Q&A, I'm going to leave this. So if you want to reach out to me, feel free.
All right, thanks, Katie. We do have several questions. I'm going to start with one that has appeared a few times in a couple of different versions, but I think the crux of it is the same. So people have written in asking about their work, if their workplace, if they're working in an educational institution, a nonprofit, a government agency, how do they handle the message that there simply is no more available money for whatever reason, because it has to, it's a once a year process, or there just is no money. What do you suggest if that's their answer?
Okay, so first do the research. As somewhere in here I said before, you're going to hear there's no money. It's a go-to, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. They're saying the exact same words. And the umbrella of nonprofit also can be million-dollar, billion-dollar moneymakers. Healthcare is nonprofit. They got a lot of money. Harvard is education and nonprofit, and we all should have Harvard's endowments. They're bigger than most countries. So do your research, especially if you're in a nonprofit or government. The information's out there on exactly where their money's coming from and what money they have. So when you're told no money, you say, well, that's interesting because I see we have an increase in donations by 30% this year. A lot of nonprofits are seeing that thanks to our change in the political world. So, and they're spending it. ACLU, ask them, they're hiring lawyers left and right. Where 2 years ago, that wasn't the situation. So they have money that they never had before. So focus on that. And absolutely, it's just a lie.
Okay. Then we had a few questions relating to gender. One question was, how do I figure out the value, if you know your male peers are being paid more than you, how do you present that information in a productive manner? And then Are there any real differences in approach for men versus women in the area of negotiating compensation? And one other question, how about the gender of the hiring manager? Does that impact things?
So you just basically want a whole other seminar, but this is just a quick question.
Yes, quick question.
Yeah. Okay, let's try to answer this as best I can. Yes, there is a difference in men and women in negotiating. Research shows women, just the sheer name, if it sounds feminine on the resume, with no change from a guy's resume, is deemed less capable. So your offer is going to be lower. You may not even get the interview. So that impacts the negotiation. You start off 2 steps behind. Negotiation is expected, but you as a woman for negotiating will be considered a problem child. So you need to do it in a nice manner. Men can be absolutely hated at work, and it doesn't impact their career at all. Women have to be liked. So now I've just created a bunch of hoops for you to figure out, now what? How do I do that? Luckily, there's research to help us. And the research shows that if women negotiate, Southerners would call it using some honey, some sugar. We negate that problem child part. And the type of negotiation style called collaborative is an excellent way to do it. So I tell women, my women clients, I tell always to use collaborative. Men, you can just go in and state, I need $1 million or I'm out of here, and no one blinks. If any woman does it, we're dead in the waters. Men, you can use collaborative too. It's a really good way, but you have other options. So what collaborative means is caring about the other side of the table and asking questions. And that is why in all of my information today, I said never say a number. That's vital for women for a couple of reasons. One, we're anchored lower. So let me use the example of just statistically, easy math. A guy is making $100 grand. A gal is doing the exact same job somewhere else. Statistically, she's making 80 grand. Both the guy and the gal decide to go apply for another job at a third company. Level up. So you're both managers and now you're going to be directors. And in the application, which is where negotiation begins, is the question of desired compensation. The guy is going to write down most likely about 120,000, somewhere in that range, that area, because the rule of thumb is 10% more is, if you're making at least 10% more, it's a good chance to move up. You would never accept less than that. Now, for a woman to put down desired salary and knowing the 10% rule, most likely, instinctively, the answer is going to be about 95,000. That's not even the same amount the guy's making right now doing the same type of job. You need to, and this is going to make most of the women on the phone right now want to throw up, put in a 50% increase of your current pay, just to start getting on the same level as the men, statistically. So that's for some of the differences of men, the style, the knowing that you're amazingly underpaid just statistically. You don't need to know anything else other than you're a woman or you're a person of color. Nothing else really needs to be known. Just play the stats on this.
How about the gender of the hiring manager?
Hiring managers are hiring managers. Their job is to get the best person at the least amount of money. A woman doesn't mean they're going to give you a better break. You still need to be prepared and know what the arguments are. You're still going to hear from a woman just like you heard from a man. We can't afford that. You're not as good as you think you are. Your research is wrong. They're going to play those same things because that's their job when hiring someone. As for knowing that men doing the same job as you are getting paid more, do not start with that line. You just brought in the lawyers. Everyone just shut up and no one's talking to you. So if the goal is to get better pay, start with kind of the bigger picture of the research in the market as a whole. Be able to compare yourself to the guys getting paid better than you. So go like, hey, you know, I know there's 5 of us doing this job. I know I brought in more clients. I know I fixed more problems. I know I saved more money. Whatever it is that you do better than Bob or Tom or whoever else is getting paid better than you, have that as part of your conversation. Save the I'm getting paid less than men to the bitter end that nothing else worked and you're ready for a lawsuit, because that's what that starts, that sentence. And it's a long haul. And you have to talk to a lawyer before you start that sentence.
All right, next question. How do I negotiate as a consultant or freelancer?
Well, that is you doing a lot of research to make sure you are stating what your fees are. This is where you are a person who is calling the shots. I'll give an example, just myself recently. A group reached out to me and asked if I would contract to do some work for their members of their association. And they said, and this is what we would pay you by the hour. I said, that's lovely, but that's half of what my hourly rate is. I really would have to think of it. That was my opening line to start the negotiation. So that's where, if your employers have a tendency nowadays to try to not make people employees because it's cheaper. So they're like, oh, we only need you for 30 hours a week and we'll call you a consultant so we don't have to give you benefits and blah, 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 and here's what you are paid. So one, well, if I'm a consultant, here's my consultant rate, and that's not enough. Or 2, well, if I'm doing consulting for you, here's all the things you're not paying for, and once again, that's not enough, and you do the market research. So the job pays on average X, and plus it has benefits, which means X plus, usually about 20 to 30%. So I would need to get hourly at least 30% more than that so that I can pay for the benefits.
Okay, next question. In your experience, are there certain industries where negotiating is either more challenging or more successful?
No, everyone likes to think their industry is harder and meaner and different and so unique, but I've now worked in the recruiting world in all kinds of different industries. At the core, they're all the same.
Right. If you're in your 50s, does you're overqualified for job postings that matched your resume perfectly equal you're too old/expensive?
All right, so there's a different question in there as well that I want to address. Never apply for a job that your resume matches perfectly. You're overqualified then. You always should be applying for a job that you're about 60–70% of a fit for. That's what they expect. In the days, and I'm going back about 20 years, when I used to take job requisitions when I worked in staffing, they would give me everything but the kitchen sink, and then I'd say, that's lovely. Now tell me what they really need to do. What are the 5 things you really care about? Because all this other stuff is just making it so you don't have to give them more money when they start doing more. So remember that. If you fit the job rec perfectly, you're overqualified, and they won't hire you more often than not. You should be going for the stretch. So regardless of your age, 50 or more, you need to look for higher level jobs to be considered at the right level for the job. So I don't know if I actually answered her question or his question as they were hoping, but I think I kind of got there.
I think so. Here's another one. I'm coming out of a 7-month sales training program ending in promotion. There are 10 peers, and I expect that they will say everyone starts at the same level. Is there any way to negotiate?
Yes. Everyone's offered the same amount. Doesn't mean everyone starts the same amount. Just like when you graduate college, there's the entry level starter, whatever, intro. We hired 100 CPAs, accountants, whatever. They all get paid the same. No, they all got offered the same, but a certain percentage, about 10%, actually negotiated. So your starting line for that can be, so if I understand correctly, there's literally no one in this company who's ever been paid more for this position. Is that what you're telling me? Just start the negotiation. Yeah, that's great. That's exciting. I'm glad that you're offering me this. I'm glad I passed the sales training that you're keeping me on. Here's, now that I'm looking at the offer and I've seen what the industry pays for this, here's what seems appropriate to me. Now, she said, or she or he said sales training, is that correct?
Yes, sales training program.
Okay, so here's the other area in sales. Commission. I've negotiated higher commission rates. That's where you can really get some good money. You know, 10,000 more in a base salary gets you nothing compared to another percent or two in commission rates.
Right, here's a good one. How do you know when their final offer really is their final offer?
They do something different. So let me give an example. A few years back, I had a car that was pretty wanted. It was, a week didn't go by that I wasn't getting some kind of postcard from some dealer saying, come in and trade your car and we will get you a newer car for the exact same money, which seemed crazy, but I kept getting versions of that. And I took a book with me and went to a dealership and said, well, I'm going to play this just to strengthen my own muscles in the negotiation world. And they'd give me a number and I'd say, no, your postcard said I wouldn't have to put any money down. They'd go back and pretend, talk to the manager, probably playing on the computer, having a cigarette, whatever. Then they'd come back and say another thing, and I'd say, no, your postcard said this. And they kept coming back and forth, and I just kept reading the novel I brought with me. I literally could be there forever. It didn't matter to me. I took a night that I didn't care about. And then he comes back and he says something, and I start to say no, and he just hands me his business card. Something different happened. So when he handed me his business card, then I knew, okay, this is the offer. Do I really want to do this or not? And I liked my car. It still worked well. Like, no, I'm good. But it's knowing that something looks different, and it varies for everyone. That's one thing. The other thing is the negotiation stops when you can no longer overcome whatever the objection is. So it's not so much their offer is, you can ask why the offer is where it is. Well, how did you determine that? Can you walk me through that? So if you see an opening, you can then say, oh, well, that doesn't make sense because. That's the other part of it.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Here's one about if during a negotiation the superior or HR rep asks outright, what do you think you should be paid or what do you want to be paid, and are pushing for a number, what do you suggest as a response?
Well, I would love to make $1 million, but I'll settle for a competitive package. Studies have shown that actually increases. I'm not being facetious. I'm not making something out. There's been studies. That language actually increases the offer. So you throw that out first. Well, no, I need a number. You got to give me a number. Well, the other part of it is, hey, you wouldn't be interviewing anyone if you didn't actually budget and approve this job offer, this job opening. So I'm assuming you've already budgeted it and it's been approved. Can you share with me what the budget for this job is? And more often than not, they actually will tell you. If those two things don't work, then say, whatever you really think the job is valued at after you've done the research, and add something to it. So if you think the job should pay 100, say 115. If you think the job should pay 50, say 60. You know, you need to add more, or you won't get what you really think it will be.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Katie, for sharing your time with us today. I appreciate it. And thanks to all our listeners for joining us. This webinar has been recorded, and it will be available on our career development website next week. I will send out an email to everyone who registered when it is posted. You'll also be receiving a short email survey about this webinar, and I encourage you to share your feedback with us. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me in the alumni office. I'm sure Katie, we didn't get to every question, so I'm sure Katie would be willing to answer an email if you want to send one to her. Like she said, the contact information is up on the screen. Also, stay tuned for more career webinars in the months to come. Up next will be our October 10th webinar, How to Land a Corporate Board Seat. More information about that webinar can be found on the alumni website. Again, thanks for joining us, and have a great afternoon.